Cool, sweet. I think we're going. I think we're live. I guess I should do a little YouTube check.
Yeah. Yeah, I got it pulled up too.
Yep. All right. Awesome.
Sweet.
Sweet. Well, welcome, man.
Mm.
Thanks for joining. I'm
Hell yeah.
excited about this.
Hell yeah, man. I appreciate you, Brian. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I am very excited to learn about our topic today of version control because I know little to nothing, but I've heard about it and I know that you know a ton about it and I'm excited. So looking
Yeah,
forward
I
to
don't know if
this,
I know
bro.
a ton about it, but it's definitely. I don't know if it's that exciting,
He's
but I think it'll
being
be exciting to
modest.
to dig into it. Um, I guess maybe we should just start like do maybe you could do a quick like bio introduction since we're on different channels, and then I can do a quick bio introduction as well, maybe like your
For sure.
background and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate it. Yeah. So my name is Mark Samansky. I have been building websites using WordPress since 2017. So, um, not as long as some folks, but a little bit of tenure at least there. I started an agency in 2018. That was back at the time. It was kind of a side gig. Still had a corporate job and everything like that, working in tech and marketing. And then right before the pandemic time, I left that job and kind of just went on my own. And had like some other things going on, but mostly on my own on this business. And then this then past 2023 was my first full time year, completely as an entrepreneur, if you want to call it like that, with Find a Tech, my agency. And then recently, this is how like I've met Brian, I've met other people, so many other people in this WordPress community. Just over the past like 6 months, I've really started to ramp up like the content and like being a part of like the WordPress community. I think there's a ton of people out there that are not in the WordPress community, even though they use WordPress. Two
Hmm.
very different things that you don't
Yeah.
understand until you understand it. But it's been great, and I'm really appreciative to have opportunities like this and chat with other great folks in this community. So that's where I'm at right now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty similar. I think I've been doing WordPress a little bit longer, but I didn't start. I was like a teacher. I was a high school teacher for a while. I did other
Nice.
careers and stuff.
Yeah.
This is sort of an unusual one, but probably about the same time. I would say like 2016, 2017 was my first time I went to like a word camp and saw
Mm-hmm.
like just those like, oh, people meet and talk about this. I did like where I was like the only web person like in a larger thing that was like completely unrelated. So I was like, oh, cool. You can like talk to people about like the
Mm-hmm.
thing you're doing all day because your coworkers have no idea. They just like tell you what to put on their website.
Yeah.
It was pretty good. Nowadays, I work at an agency, so this kind of stuff, version control, the stuff we'll talk about, is pretty like critical in the agency model, depending on like where you're at. But it's also something like I didn't use it for years. Eventually I kind of had to use it because that's how you collaborate with other people. And eventually I just sort of like grew to enjoy using it and kind of use it all the time. But like it's a tool like if you're not using version control right now, you might not need to, but like you will start realizing you'll start seeing the science of being like, okay, I need to learn this thing. And if that's where you're at, we'll kind of give like a good overview of like what it is, how it works, kind of just like broad stuff. We're not going to like, be in the command line or doing anything weird like that today.
Mm-hmm.
But this was kind of came from like a conversation with you. I'm kind of curious, like, what was your idea or concept when you were like, what made you say like, man, version control, I should like ask somebody about this.
Yeah. So, going back to it, the WordPress community, right? So like being a part of it now, again, you've been a part of it definitely longer than I have. You start to get in there and you see, okay, well, and a little bit of background that I left out was when I was building websites, when I started, I was using Elementor, right? So it was like I used a page builder, Elementor, and then recently switched to Bricks. So like I feel like a little bit more separate conversation, but I feel like a little more like savvy now with kind of like the CSS and closer to the code, if you want to call it anything like that in a way. Um, but the things that I hear online, things that I read, and things that I see, I'm always like inquisitive, and I like want to know what the other options are out there, and not just. I'm not saying that page builders and version controls are like options that you could pick from, but like just different methodologies and things like that. Selfishly, like one of the things that I would love to do is continue to build out a team and continue to have like maybe multiple developers one day and all that sort of stuff. And I recognize that as you scale in that type of way, if that's one of your goals, these are types of conversations and just like, tooling, sets of
Mm-hmm.
tooling and things like that, that you're probably going to need to at least be aware of, if not implement. And I'll tell you the very specific reason that this came up, because I've heard of version control and Git and all that before, but I was having a chat with somebody that like is an agency owner way above me, like multi-million dollars a year. And they were saying that like when they hired their first developer, they were like, like they were doing stuff differently with page builder and stuff like, no. The first thing that person said to them is like, we're version controlling this. We're implementing Git. We're doing all of that. And to me, there's just a disconnect there. Like, what does that actually mean? Can you still use like normal WordPress, page builder, core, whatever, and also version control? Literally, what's the difference? What are the benefits? When to use it, when not to use it? And I know that you're very knowledgeable in those pieces. So reached out to you and here we are.
Yeah, you're kind of like, in my mind, I had like, there's a couple things that you need to, if you need these things, you need version control. And like the first one you brought up was like collaboration. And like, that's kind of the first thing is like, the minute you're like, I might be working on a project, you might be or another developer might be working on a project, and we need like to not break what each other is working on, that's like your first sign of like version control. Cause that's one of the first things it's going to do. It's going to like help you sort of like, I work here, you work there. Let's merge our stuff together and make sure it all works together. Make sure that like, I don't open up the WordPress like theme file editor and change some stuff, and then you go in there and you change some stuff and we don't know who changed it. So that like collaboration piece is like probably the first place where you'll see it. And that's kind of why it makes sense. Like if you want to grow your team, they're going to want that kind of consistent workflow. They're going to want to know like, hey, this other person worked on this thing and like, I don't want to break it, that sort of stuff. So that collaboration is like one thing. The other piece is like that sort of history, that like time capsule. Cause like with version control, you're like, everything you do is just saved like line by line. And so you can be like, why is this weird line of code there? You can go back, see who wrote it, when they wrote it, all that sort of stuff. It's like a time machine of every single change. So that, I would say like that's the first kind of piece, is that if you're going to be like growing a team, you're probably going to start wanting to use it.
Okay. So the big one is collaboration, and let's hit on that for a second then. So that makes total sense. And I'm going to ask some questions because just the way my mind works, like there's a lot of like almost like networking questions that I would ask like from that. So like, again, like if you're in like a Bricks or an Elementor or whatever, like obviously there's nuances to it. But if you, like, I remember as an example, I think this is a really key piece. When you're talking about version control with like literally lines of code versus like if you're in an Elementor and you have like, you move an element in and then you can like undo it, for instance. And then there's also like a section that's like history or revisions, and you can like go back. What is the difference between those two things? And then I have like a follow-up question of like how those are actually being done. But like, does that sound like it's similar, or like, cause as a layperson, I would assume they're similar, but what's the differences there?
Yeah. So that's like, this is like the biggest like core concept that people are struggling with WordPress and the block editor. Because I think if you came from page builders and stuff where you do everything inside of WordPress, you design inside of WordPress, and you maybe use a plugin to have custom post types, you use a plugin for that. Custom fields, you use a plugin for that. Designing your header and footer, you use a plugin. So like you're using a plugin for everything, and it's not like you're not writing code, right? You're not like in the code base. Versus other people who maybe came from like the heavier development background, they want to do all that stuff in code and then, put that code on the site, deploy it or something like that. So it's, now that we have the block editor, you have all these WordPress developers who never used page builders before and who had version control and all this stuff. And they're going in there and they're saying, wait, if I do it in WordPress, I like that. How do I control that? Like, people are kind of like, people in that side are actually kind of getting upset about the block editor, because to them it's like, well, no, I can't control any of this. And there are ways to do it and stuff. But like what you're talking about is like in WordPress, you have that revisions where like every time you you save a change, you can kind of see that revision history. And that's like one tiny aspect of it, basically, because it's just changes. Whereas with version control, there's also collaboration, like merging things from different people at the same time. There's also moving things across servers. Like I have a local development. I have a staging site where we're testing some stuff. I have a development site where I'm testing stuff, and I can use my version control, my Git, to like move some code there, see if it works, pull it back, move some code here, those sorts of things. So like moving code across instances, all that sort of stuff. The revisions is just like a tiny little piece of it. In fact, does this work? Oh, cool. Yeah, like
Nice.
more than just tracking changes. But like,
Gotcha.
Definitely, oh cool, that's Aruba. That's definitely like one aspect of it, but it goes like way heavier than that.
For sure. I think Do you mind if we just hit on that fully though, and then move to the next one? Because I
Yeah,
100%,
yeah, 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 yeah.
100%. Because like I just want to understand it from. I think there's going to be some people that watch this that are in a similar position to me, and they're not going to know. Obviously, there's going to be people that use this every day, and there's some people that like have only used page builders, and they don't know like what they could be missing or if they should be using it and those types of things. So that's the one comparison that I would make there. I don't know if this question necessarily fits here, but I know that I've maybe even you and I like talked about it on Twitter once. What is this concept of when you're building in a page builder, or maybe even Gutenberg, like, but I'm not 100% sure, but let's just stick to page builder and you can tell me about the core experience. When you're building in a page builder, are you saving, is that stuff getting saved generally to like a flat file versus like in the database? I know there's like something kind of going on there. And does that play into this at all or no?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So when you do stuff in a page builder or in the block editor, that's saved in your database. And databases are so much harder to move around, and they're so much harder to merge changes and stuff. That's why with WordPress, when you make like a theme in WordPress, say you make a header, right? You can actually click a button and send it into the files, into your file system, like as an HTML file, and it'll save it as that. So like a WordPress block theme, that's why they use all these little HTML parts and these little PHP parts, because they're letting you basically build it there, but then send it back as a file, because you can version control files, you can deploy files and stuff. Databases are so much harder. And a lot of the higher end, like enterprise WordPress hosts, like Pantheon or WordPress VIP, they have this rule where they say code can move up, but content can only move down. So you can always take your code and push it up to like your live site, but you can never change something in your database and push that to your live site, because on your live site, you don't want to overwrite the database. You got like your orders in there, you got your form entries in there, you got comments, you can't overwrite that. You can only move stuff from the database like down into your local. And if you want to move stuff up to your production site, it has to be at the code level. It's this like code goes up, content goes down concept. And so that's kind of part of it too. So it's like, yeah. So, but to answer your question, when you make changes in a page builder and the block editor, that's all saved in your database, which makes version control very hard. That's why WordPress lets you kind of flatten that stuff into the file system.
Okay, so let's talk about some quick definitions then, just so I'm on the same page as you. Code, if you say code, that was synonymous with like literally like HTML files, right? Like anything that's like a file. And then that's similarly, another synonym would be flat file, because it's an actual file rather than like content in a database or like a database entry. Okay. And then content in that sense would be the stuff that's in the database. So that's why you're saying content can only go down, code can only go up. Okay. Okay. That makes sense. All right. So all of that kind of revolves around the idea of just the tracking changes pieces of version controlling. And that gives you one of that benefits is like that you can be working on multiple different things at the same, like multiple people can be working on multiple different things. And obviously it keeps going with the other additional benefits. Okay.
Yeah. And there's more to why those hosts do that sort of stuff. Like one is security. Like on those hosts, you can't even just like go into WordPress and install a plugin. Like that's just not allowed. You have to, because that's code. Like you basically like all the code, they put that on a server that's really locked down and protected, because they don't want anyone to log into your site and put some malicious code in there or something like that, right? So it's totally locked down. Let's say you want to upload some images to your media library. That goes to like a whole different server that's like edge cache and all this crazy stuff, because they're just so controlled on like where you put PHP and JavaScript, because they don't want you to like, they don't want any security vulnerabilities. So that's why you have to have some sort of version control process where you're like, oh, I need a new plugin, put it in my version control locally and push the code up so that I can run it on my live site. Like that's how locked down it gets at those like higher end hosting companies.
Gotcha. Okay. That's super interesting. Okay. Awesome. All right. So what would you say the other benefits are? Did you have like the first one obviously was just kind of the piece there, but what else we got?
Yeah. So number one is like collaborating. So like, let's say we're both working on a site. I can pull the site down. You can pull the site down. You can work on this feature. I can work on that feature. We can merge it together later. I don't have to like worry that when I try to push my changes, it's going to change your changes and stuff. Similar to that, sometimes we have clients where, let's say they have like 5 or 10 new things they want built on their site at the same time. And they come to you and they say, can you work on these like 5 things for me? And thing number one, we're ready to put that live, but thing number two, we're not. And thing number three, yes, we also want that to go live, but not thing number four. And you're working on all these different things. How can I, put some of that live on the website, but not put the other things live on the website? How can I update this, but not update that? That's like another sort of thing that we're going to use version control for, because it's going to let us have all these different versions of the site and then kind of pick and match and merge the pieces that they want live and test out other things in other environments, sort of stuff like that. So it's about staggering out your features, sort of like working on different things independently.
So that is, to me, the connection that I make there is kind of like having almost multiple different staging sites in a way, but you can, I'm sure that's not the right terminology, but like you could have like multiple different, I guess kind of current code bases in a way, I don't know. And then you can merge the things that you want at given times, you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So we can work on a thing, show it to a client, they're not happy with it, but it's not going to hold up all the other changes that we're trying to make for them.
Okay. And when you're talking about this, just so I get a better picture of it, when you're saying like you're showing it to a client, like is everything we're talking about here like being done completely custom coded, or is this, are there pieces that like, are we still talking about like WordPress and you're custom coding everything just like literally in, I don't even know, like theme files and different files like that? Like what's that actually look like for me? That's somebody that like me that's never done that part of it either.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's basically custom code. So like a good example is I have a client, they want to have like pop-up banners at the top of their website, right? That show up. First we could just put in a plugin and like spend a couple hours like trying out different plugins to see if they're going to work the way we want, to see if they're going to be like performant, make sure they're not using like weird PHP sessions or things that are going to be really slowing down the server, that sort of stuff. But really, say we build the feature, then we can build the code for that. And then when we're ready, we would push that to the live site, and then they can go into the block editor and design their little, pop-ups or whatever afterwards. But there's generally some code that needs to happen first for a lot of these features, mainly because if they wanted something like more off the shelf, then it's just a different type of client, a different type of site.
Okay. So if we're still totally in the WordPress ecosystem though, and we're talking about a project that has gotten to, the point of launch, let's say, with this, what from like, to give you my example, right? Like if I'm like my website's launched that I just launched for a client, it's going to have a theme, which in my case right now would be bricks. It's going to have plugins that are doing different types of things and everything like that. What does that website look like? Does it have plugins? Does it have themes and things? Are they all just custom plugins, custom themes, or is there nothing going on? Like what's that actually look like from an admin perspective?
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you can get really minimal with plugins, You can get really, like, you're always going to have a theme. Generally, if a client's coming to you for something custom, the theme is going to be pretty custom because they want some custom styles, custom animations on things. They want, different templates. Maybe they have a ton of different content types or whatever. And so, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, hey, let's load up like ACF and let's go in there and make our custom post types and let's go make all our custom fields. And you can definitely do that. And there's plenty of times that we do that. That's not like unheard of. But sometimes on those sites, you just want to like streamline the dependencies as much as possible. And you can write those WordPress things in code and you can do it a lot faster than like clicking through a bunch of buttons on an ACF. It's a lot faster to write the code. GitHub Copilot like writes it all so fast now. I'm like, I need a post type for this. It's like, feeds it all out. And you just go in and tweak a few things. So in that sense, it's kind of like a power user thing. Like it's just faster. I don't have this dependency. I don't have to worry about plugin updates. I don't have to worry about anything because I wrote it in the code myself and it's just going to be like fully controlled. And chances are it's because the client wants to do something a little crazy, They want to do something outside the normal box of WordPress.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I mean that would be my main big question. I think we got a lot of good comments on here too. We should probably look at those.
Yeah,
I think they're probably thinking of way more stuff than I am because this is just I'm trying to process everything. This is fantastic information. The one thing that I have though about that you mentioned there is that would be, and I think this is really the key. Obviously, you have to understand what version controlling is, Git, and everything like that, like we're going through. But I think the big thing overarching for me is like, and we'll get to it, but okay, so like if you're an agency or a freelancer or something like that or whatever, like what situation, or you're building an agency, what situation would somebody have to come to you and say like, hey, we want XYZ, and then your response to that is, okay, we're going to build that custom in a sense. And then obviously we're going to have to do all this. It's a slightly tangential question, I guess. But like, at what point would I need to say like, okay, you know what? I can't use Elementor. I can't use Bricks. I can't even use Core. Like, I should probably build this custom. Obviously that's probably a great leap from where I'm at, from where a lot of people are at. But I think that's like a very interesting one is, what have you seen just like in your experience? Like, why is like, what signifies that? Is it just so you have more control over everything, higher security because you're writing all the code? I'm sure there's a litany of things, but like, what do you think inside baseball on that is decision?
Yeah, it's really hard. Especially, I used to be one of those people who be like, WordPress for everything. Nowadays, it's a lot of situations where you're like, WordPress is really great if you have a ton of content and you want to manage a lot of content. And you want a bunch of blog posts or articles, or and you want that experience of logging in, changing content or whatever. If that's not what's happening, then WordPress is probably not the place to go. But if that's your thing, content, an e-commerce shop, that sort of stuff. One thing that really differentiates whether a client should get custom code or not is like, number one is like their budget. Some of them just have a higher budget and they want to do kind of crazy things. But the other one is like, how valuable is your website? Like, if your website went down for 5 hours, how much money would that cost you? If it's not going to cost you any money for your website to go down for 5 hours, then you probably don't care about most of these things, right? Like, if your website's not producing income at that level, it's not really a huge deal. If your website is like, we're an e-commerce store and if we go down, we stop making money, or we're an affiliate link content mill, and if we go down, we stop sending affiliate links and we stop making money. Well, now your site is critical to your business. It's a piece of infrastructure. And do you really want to like pick some, freelancer on Upwork or something that you don't know? They're going to throw a bunch of plugins at it and you're just going to hope that one of them doesn't break in the next update, and you're not going to test those updates, all those sorts of things, and just hope your website doesn't go down for 5 hours. Like, that's fine. It's just about what's the value to you. And if it's okay, then definitely go the cheaper route. Like, there's not really a need for that.
That makes total sense. And I don't want to derail too much but like on that specific point there, I think maybe a different comparison would be like a large agency. Like, I've heard the numbers like 500 grand for like, basically full version control, custom development, stuff like that, full, custom themes, all that sort of stuff, basically no plugins, versus like more of like, we'll say like 50 grand, but that's built in like a Bricks or in something like that, where there's definitely plugins. There's not nearly as much custom code. There's not version control, but it isn't, I feel like there was just a conflating situation there. It's like in one way we're talking about technology, and the other way we're talking about like the application of that technology. So I think that it might be a longer form conversation in and of itself, but like that those two things where it's like, is version control solving those problems or solving those problems, or is it like the people that are just almost like that's almost the way that I interpreted that in a way. So, but I hear what you're saying, and I think that that's the comparison that I always make in my head. It's like, can I sell a $50,000 website using like a Bricks version stuff like Bricks and plugins, versus where does that magic line in the sand where it's like, okay, now we should start thinking about custom, we should start thinking about other things. You bring up a great point though, as far as like, if you want your website to stay up, you care about it, there's money being made, you should obviously have a little bit more control and I guess know what's going on, like the whole code base a little bit more. That makes total sense. So cool.
Yeah, and there's certain, like, it's not like, oh, plugins are bad or dependencies are bad, but there's definitely some that are, you just have to be able to say like, how certain do I feel? Like an ACF, it's like ACF's been around for a decade or more. Like I'll put ACF on any site. I have zero concerns that WP Engine is going to like take down a bunch of sites with ACF, Yeah. Some of the new page builders and stuff, I'm going to be a little bit more concerned, and
rightfully so. Yeah.
Just depends. It's just, is it battle tested? Should we pop up some of these comments real quick?
Definitely. Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff in here.
Can you share, or is it just me? Let's see.
I think it's just you. I think I can just like look at it.
Okay. I'm just going to go kind of chronologically then. Yeah. All right. Adrian, when creating block themes, I tend to build my layouts inside Gutenberg then I copy the blocks markup to the theme files. So if I mess something up, I can use Git to revert changes. So yeah, that's another big one is, it's so easy to roll back all the changes you just made or test a bunch of changes. Like I'm going to test this idea. I'm going to see how it works. Nope, I don't like it. Roll back to the way it was. That kind of ability to go back and forth gets super happy. But yes, with Gutenberg, it's a little harder.
Is that like a manual way what that's describing there? Is that like a manual way of like flattening some files? Like you're building it with a visual builder, those would be going to like the database more or less, just the way that it's built, because you can't version control like in the visual builder, and then you take that markup and you drop it into like an actual, a file. So now it's like actually it could be version controlled. Is that kind of, am I understanding that to some degree?
Yeah, definitely. So like here, I'll even just like pull up a screen just to like show you an example. Let's see if I can remember how to share screen. So like there's definitely a few different ways to go with it. Let's do, well.
Nice.
Okay. That hides our faces, but that's all right. Let me see if I can do it with our faces. Okay. Does that seem big enough? So like, this is literally my website, and I have like WordPress WP content, and I have like a child theme I was messing around with. And like, this is literally the markup of what it looks like inside the block editor. Like it's just HTML with comments. It's a little controversial, but like my theme just has a bunch of the HTML files with all of the different like content in it. And so it's sourced here. If I don't like anything, I can change it. If I want another developer to work on it, I can see their changes side by side. I can test them out. I could pull their changes and see if it looks good or something like that. Now, again, like my personal website, probably not the best use case for like version control, but I think it's just kind of an example. But that process of getting this to here used to be manual, but there is this plugin now that they've released that basically gives you like a button and you click it and it like does it for you. So it's not as manual as it used to be.
Okay, we got to stop then for a second, because that this title of this create block theme. So again, don't want to derail, but block themes though, is that kind of like what that means? Like this is that you're kind of creating a block theme if you're bringing the stuff into your JSON file from, a visual piece in a way, or
yeah, because like there used to be like most WordPress runs on classic themes, which is just a normal WordPress theme. But with a block theme, it basically means you use Gutenberg, the block editor, for like literally everything on your site.
Oh, okay.
So like the header, the footer, everything. So your theme could be nothing. It could literally just be like a JSON file with just some styles. But it doesn't matter because these are all the blocks that come in core anyway. But some people like to put it into a file, and then they can control it a little bit better.
Okay. So did you build your website directly in here just with code, or did you do the whole thing where you built a visual? I mean, I saw the stream where you're building with Ollie, right? So you built it there and then you pulled it down?
Yeah, I built it out the way I wanted to, and then I have this plugin and I click one button and it just sticks it there, and then I can version control that. And then because I wanted to, like, now I can do some change. Like I wanted to test a couple different styles and stuff. But like once I make all those changes inside of Ollie, like right, once I change all that stuff, if I don't like it, what do I have to do? Go back to each one and like undo it? Like that would just take me forever. So it's just an easier way to revert those changes or test them out.
So when you are in like GitHub there and you have the code and you can version control it there, is this where it comes into play where like when you're testing stuff, are you testing stuff like just locally? Or
yeah. So I have like a copy of my website locally that I do all this stuff on. And this is just like my personal website. Like I could do it on the live site. Yeah. Like no one's visiting it. We're it's a little bit. I just wanted it for an example.
It's an example though. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do it there. I have it locally, and then it's kind of like easy. I think people think like, oh, GitHub Git, that's version control, but that's really just like one example of it. But like Git, it's like I do it all here. I can say like, all right, I'm happy with it. Push it to GitHub. And that's kind of nice because it stores it in the cloud. It's kind of like Google Docs. Like I could work on or Dropbox. I can work on some files here. They can show up in my cloud. Other people can share them and have access and change the same file, that sort of thing. It's that same approach. It's just that once I push something to GitHub, I just have it automatically go to my live website, which is like what most people will have.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, so if it's you have like a setting or whatever, like when it goes there, that's when you've been like, okay, well, I approved these changes, I approved this code, like I'm ready to push it live, and it just automatically pushes
Yeah.
from there. Interesting. Okay, that's dope. Sweet.
Let's pull up a couple. Oh yeah. So like this is another, I think, kind of clear point. This is code documentation, code review, pull requests, feature branching, ability to reverse changes, or just follow how the code has evolved over time. I think that's another big piece is once you want to be part of like a larger team or something, that's when this version control also gets more important. For example, like this past week, I've been trying to fix something in Gutenberg for Matt Medeiros' issue that he filed. Yeah. And so the way to do that, to fix something WordPress, to report a bug or whatever, it's a shared code base that everybody can work on. You use the same approach. So like I literally had to, do that same thing, like make a copy of WordPress locally, make my changes, submit it back to there. Some other developers who were super helpful gave me comments. They suggested changes. We worked through some other stuff, and then eventually it gets merged and deployed.
This is probably a stupid question, but like if you had like 100 lines of code and you had like 5 people that were like working on it, let's say, and then like you all pull it down, right? Mm-hmm. And is that a pull request or no?
Well, you can pull it down, and pull request is a weird word, but basically it's like when you say, hey, I want to make this change, and you send them your branch, like your version of the changes, that's a pull request. It's like, here's my changes.
Okay. So it's like when you submit your changes, that's a pull request?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So you pull the code down, you can just, download whatever. So you download like this 100 lines of code that we're talking about here, and all 5 of you download it, and then you all make changes to it, and they're not all going to be the same. So you're saying like just version controlling Git, like all of this, just like then you say like, all right, we're going to do a pull request, and we're going to like kind of submit it all. How like it literally just knows, like obviously we don't need to go super technical there, but it just literally knows about all the changes that you guys have made, and it may break like if you merge it all back, and but like
yeah.
how does, wow.
That's basically it here. Like I'll just do like a quick, this is literally Matt Medeiros wanted template parts to be a command, right? And so he wanted it. So I submitted like code to do it, and you have to write up, like this is the other thing, it helps you because you got to write everything, you got to explain why, you got to show people like test it, make sure it works here, things I need help on. Then there's all these like automations that run. It scans the code, it checks for like basic vulnerabilities, it checks to make sure you didn't do anything you're not supposed to do, all these like automated processes, unit tests run, stuff like that's a little above my pay grade, but stuff that, because obviously this runs on like a lot of websites, they don't want to break people's websites. Then let's see, then I gotta like start tagging people because nobody answers it. Like you gotta find someone, hey, I made this thing, can someone look at it? You gotta start bugging people. Then they start giving you feedback, and the feedback also, like they'll go into your code and be like, hey, this is what I think you should have done. This is what I think, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I'll just click over here. It's literally going to show you exactly like, here's what I removed, here's what I added. And like, that's kind of the value of it.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, that's important. We're getting a couple comments there too. Pull request, you're requesting to have your code added to the main or official repo, and then something's not a pull request, it's a commit. I've definitely heard of commit too. Like commit your code. So
yeah. So like, I mean, in WordPress, like in Gutenberg, I can literally see like every single thing that's been committed. Like you can just go through every commit, who worked on it, when did it break something, all that sort of stuff.
So this is for anybody, I kind of knew this part of it, but this is what open source means, right? Like you can't go see iOS, right? You can't see the full code base for everything else, but you could see it for WordPress. So more or less, this is the idea in a way of open source too. You can just see everything.
Yeah, and you can not only do that, you can just take the code and change it, right, and say, I want to do my own version of WordPress.
Right? That's a fork, right? Okay.
So you can fork it and say, which there's one really big fork of WordPress that just doesn't have Gutenberg in it, and like that's the selling point of it.
Okay. All right, we're learning a lot of terms here. This is great. What is it, and an issue is just like a problem, like literally like
Yeah. So an issue is like, hey, this is broken, or hey, I want to try this new thing, or hey, I think we should add this feature, that sort of stuff.
got it. Okay, cool. All right, so like the
Okay.
version controlling side of things, though, like GitHub and Git, I think Git is Git's like more of a thing, right? Like a methodology or whatever, and then GitHub is like a proprietary thing that is like where it's like there's other GitHubs, right? Is there like Bitbucket or
Yeah, yeah,
something?
yeah. So like Git is like a language that handles all
Right.
this stuff. And there's other ones like actually WordPress core doesn't even use Git, it uses something else. If you want to be in the plugin directory, like if you make a plugin, you'll have to use its Subversion. It's basically like an alternate version of Git. But GitHub is just a private company that it's like owned by
Right.
Microsoft. They basically just said like, hey, we're just gonna like offer free GitHub hosting. It's kind of like the central place now though, but there's competitors to it. You can roll your own. There's hosts like WP Engine, for example, is a host where you don't even have to use GitHub. You just use Git built into the platform, or SiteGround's like that too. So yeah, it's kind of like a nest, like a tangled nest. But they're like you can use Git definitely without GitHub. GitHub's just kind of like become the de facto one.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Do we want to look at some more of these comments? I know we got a lot.
Yeah,
Still got
I
a
know.
lot to
There's
cover here. Appreciate all
let's
you
see.
guys too. This is dope. I am learning so much.
Let's go. Third party version control, bricks, Elementor Beaver Builder. How would you version control these? Is it even possible?
That's a
And
good
like the
question.
short answer is honestly not really. Like it's just because you do everything in the database, it's just going to kind of live there. So there's not really a super widespread great solution for stuff when it's all inside your database. And like I said, that's why the block editor is trying to give you that way to get it out of the database back to the file system.
I think that was a question that we had a discussion on X was you said like is bricks store them flat or something? And I was like I have no idea. So that makes sense though. I'd have to double check for sure, but I'm assuming like most page builders store that data in the database, so it like calls into the database, I guess, to load all of that. And because it's in the database, like you said, it's hard to version control a database. Borderline, I don't know if it's impossible, but it's harder obviously because it's not the same type of thing.
Yeah.
It's not like flat files. Okay, that makes sense. Cool.
Let's see. We got Chris says also there's a difference between having a repository. There is a difference between having a repository for a specific theme or plugin or a repository for a whole site managed with Composer. So yeah, that like what I do and a lot of people do is like you kind of version control a couple folders and then like let the rest of it just work the way WordPress normally does. You might just have version control just for your theme. You might have a plugin. Any plugin that's like in WordPress in the repository, technically any plugin that's on WordPress is supposed to have a public version of their code that you can read because that's part of the license. So, especially if you're in the plugin directory, any of those will be on somewhere on GitHub or something where you can look at the code yourself, change it, that sort of thing. So it's kind of used at all different layers. And Composer's like a whole. I don't even know if we'll go into Composer. It's a whole other topic. But yeah.
Okay. Interesting. There's another one there.
Let's
Matt,
see, we
yeah.
got Matt says accountability. You're not putting a plugin in place of a critical feature the customer is asking for. So yeah, I think that just goes back to what we were talking about earlier. That the choice for custom code is really based on your how critical the feature is and how much the client is going to pay you for it.
Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, that's just, you're not relying on, like Matt said, you're not like relying on a plugin. You know, like you said earlier, like you rely on ACF because like you trust ACF, but like depending on what the feature is, if like, I guess like a real world scenario would be, even though maybe this wouldn't actually necessarily happen with everybody, is like, let's say you wanted to create like an RSVP system for like a wedding website, and your option one is just type in RSVP onto like the plugin directory, and then you find something that probably somebody made half decent, you know, like a solo developer or whatever, they made something that you could either get that for free or maybe they have a premium version. But like that's world one, and then world two is like, okay, I can rely on this guy to do this, to handle this code base, hopefully update it whenever there's any issues or anything like that, versus like build it myself, version control it and everything. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's an easy way to answer that question, which way is right, which way is wrong. I guess it's very personal. But if I'm understanding, that seems like kind of the juxtaposition.
Yeah, exactly. And Brendan, how much of what you're doing now is fully custom? Do you have a collection of, say, a star rating plugin? Yeah. So this is a really good question. Like, before page builders and stuff, like I was thinking like social icons, like, you're building sites and then they would give you like the social icon as like a little, like, it'd be like a PNG inside of like a
Yeah.
XD file or something,
Yeah.
But like now I'm guessing like Bricks probably has a social icons component, right? That you can just throw
Yeah, I
in.
think that they have libraries too, and then like you can just use an SVG. You can upload SVG. A lot of people say upload SVG just so you're not like
Yeah, yeah.
calling the whole library or anything like that. I think is kind of the concept.
Yeah, and like WordPress core has like a social like icons block. Like that used to be a thing like used to do just manually, and it's like why like
Yeah.
it's the same icons on literally every website. So like some stuff's like it's in core or your page builder, or like I do have some kind of like stuff I reuse. I reuse a lot of stuff between projects, things like that.
Gotcha.
I'm gonna try to burn through. I'm like
Yeah.
18 minutes behind on comments. Chris, also, do you want to hope 70 rando plugins continue to work together or intentionally
Yeah.
built and integrated code?
That's an important one. Yeah.
Yeah, especially like I don't know, do you do a lot of WooCommerce or like e-commerce?
Yeah, and it can be a cluster. Yeah, I mean, I haven't had luckily too many issues, but yeah, I totally understand the concept. When you start getting to like a ridiculous amount of plugins, it's not good. It's definitely not the way to go.
Let's see. Ivan says, what would be the use case for custom block theme versus custom classic theme? Not sure if I should invest time in learning, creating custom blocks, and abandoning. Yeah, I'm not sure if you should either. I mean, it just depends. Depends on what you're doing, who your clients are, what do they want to do, what are you comfortable with, what's gonna like be profitable. At some point in time, I think like block themes will be the way to do WordPress, and I think there'll be a whole ecosystem around that, but it's maybe not there yet.
Yeah.
Keep moving. Let's see. This one, Chris says, GitHub is to Git like WordPress.com is to WordPress.org. I guess that's like a good comparison. It's like the shiny paid version that sits on top.
Gotcha.
See, Joe says, do you use any migration plugins? I guess, what about you? How are you doing? Like, do you do migration plugins? Like, do you have different environments, stuff like that?
Yeah. So I would say like the closest thing that I have there is I've had to migrate a few websites. I migrate websites all the time, but it's not. This is actually something that I think would be really important because I think I'm going to have to do something like this if I continue with this one project that I'm working on. But I migrate sites all the time, but I would say it's like more like, to me, that was like cloning. Like I have like grid pane, and they make it really easy to take like a starter, like a blueprint website, and clone it into something else. So I don't really know if that counts as a migration. I think probably a more something you could definitely provide some insight on is like if I had a e-commerce website, specifically like the portal for my business, right? Like all my clients are in there. It has WooCommerce. It has all that sort of stuff. It has like a website, it has content and stuff like that too, but it has like dynamic data and as far as the things in the database. Database is big. There's content too. How would I migrate that to the new version of it? Like if it's built with Elementor. So like if I built it on the block editor, I built it with bricks, like moving, you know what I mean? Like that seems more like a compartmentalized migration in a way. Cause I don't want to lose the data. You know what I mean? I don't know. Terminology might be wrong, but I don't want to lose like the orders and things like that. But I do want to change the other stuff. And I have no idea how to do that now that we're saying that all of it, I guess, is technically in the database with the way that I build. So
yeah. And that's definitely like are you using like WooCommerce or what do you use?
yeah, WooCommerce and WooCommerce and Elementor on the old one, and then a bunch of other plugins and things like that. But I'm not, there's no, there's a Hello Elementor theme. So like, it's not, I'm assuming they're not like flat files for any of that type of stuff. And then the new one would probably be with the bricks and WooCommerce and everything. So that piece of it will be similar. Maybe there's a way to just WooCommerce to WooCommerce transfer.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying in general, like those compartmentalized migrations would be kind of interesting, which I'm assuming you've definitely definitely had experience
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. And that's the, like, you basically just have to go into your database and say, like, here's my WooCommerce tables,
Hmm.
bring those over, leave everything else. That used to be harder because WooCommerce used to use like post types for everything. It's a little
Hmm.
easier now that they have like their own tables. But yeah, that's a common thing where you'll say, like, I just want these tables to continue and I want to replace all these other tables that have like the post content and the settings and all that sort of stuff. And so yeah, you'll be able to definitely do that. And like they're like just like there's migration plugins, like I think WP All Import and stuff like that. DB Migrate Pro maybe, where they'll give you that option, be like, hey, I just want these tables. And so that's where you start getting under the hood and understanding like where is all this stuff saved, where is it going to be, and then you can do that definitely.
Yeah, I've used Migrate Guru for very simple ones, just because it does it all like kind of, I would say, over the air, like its own servers. You don't have to pull anything down. But yeah, anything more complex probably need to do something a little bit, give it a little more thought.
Yeah. And then there's stuff like this, like SEO is critical and we don't write that custom every time, even for big clients. Like, yeah, at
Mm,
the end of the day, like, you're going to throw like Yoast or Rank Math on a site. That's just, or I guess Jetpack SEO is, I
yep.
guess people are using. So,
Nice.
um, this was, I guess, an answer to the other question about investing in block themes. There are a lot of benefits to learning how block themes work, and you can include aspects of it into classic themes. A recent hybrid theme I did cut my CSS from 3,000 lines to 900. So
Oh wow.
that's like the piece where I think a lot of the benefit of that stuff is like we're all using the same stuff. So let's just like, why should you have to write a bunch of CSS for like paragraphs and headings when like everyone's going to? So like it's definitely
Right.
streamlining all that stuff. Um, but it also, I think the other thing too is like you don't build a design for 20 different sites, right? Like if you build a site, you're building a one-to-one, like my design for my one client site, right?
Currently, yeah. I don't know if it'd be a better business option to make them more standardized, but yeah, currently it's pretty much all like custom in that regard, like custom designed. Yeah.
Yeah. So like one thing I have a client right now where it's like build a block theme, but then they can reuse it over and over. And then they go in and they change the fonts, change the colors
Right.
in the block editor, but then everything else stays the same. It just like automatically populates through the whole thing. And I think that's a lot of where it comes from is like people that log into WordPress and they just want like pick a theme off a shelf and change it a little bit. Which is I think different than like what you're going to use bricks for or what I'm going to do, which is like I'm making a design for you,
Right.
specific, hand tailored to your situation.
Yeah, that's the tough part, man. There's just too many different options, too many different like goals. And when we don't talk about the goals before we talk about how to do things, it's like, well, that's, putting the cart before the horse a little bit. So yeah, there's just a lot of different ways to handle it, depending on what you want to do.
Yeah.
Mm.
Kevin says there's a lot of nuance when migrating page builder sites, that is for sure. For example, Elementor generates cache CSS files that contain URL references to your source site.
Mm.
Yeah, that is another piece of, and I think Bricks is going to do a lot of this stuff for you too, where like it's all in the database, but like you don't want to run through the database and generate all this stuff every time someone hits your site. So they generate flat files and they do store those on your site as well. And so if you ever have problems with like element stuff, it's like clear the cache, delete all the cache, regenerate all that sort of stuff because it is like this kind of weird mix. So like
That
that's actually a good point.
that's a very standard button, I feel like, in page builders, like regenerating the CSS. Yeah, and then
Mm-hmm.
Elementor I think even has one where like if you're moving from like one URL to another domain or whatever to another, I think it even has like a way built in to literally like go through. I guess that's what it's doing, going through and changing the URLs. I assume. Interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Let's see. Tron asks, how about WP CLI for migration over migration plugins? So that's another thing too. It's like if you want to do something that's free and fast, you can learn WP CLI, but it's like a huge learning curve,
Yeah.
or you can just pay for the plugin and it's going to be a little easier.
Yeah. I heard WP CLI is very like powerful and good, but yeah, same thing. It's like gotta want to learn that and figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool.
And Kevin, oh yeah, because Kevin's at
Oh,
WP Migrate. Yeah.
Nice.
Integrations
Sweet.
with popular page builders. Yeah, so I mean, it's like all this stuff just depends, like that. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much more to like version control than even this, or like there's so much more to like these tools beyond that people are using. You can have, it's like building all your CSS and JavaScript really streamlined before it deploys. Like, all these sorts of like crazy things, scanning your code, checking your code, like all these kind of crazy things that it's used for. But like at the end of the day, it's only useful if you use those things. And if you don't need those things and you're not collaborating and you're just a solo person, you probably don't need to worry about it. But like if you kind of want to maybe work at somewhere where you're going to work with a team, maybe move up, maybe get some clients who have higher expectations and higher budgets and stuff, it's a interesting thing to start dipping your toes into. But it's definitely like weird coming from like the WordPress side where like we're so used to just doing everything inside of WordPress.
Okay. So, but I think what I'm interpreting then though is that very good for collaboration. There's some other things which, we definitely talked about. I'm sure there's even more we can hit on, but at that level though, what you said there is, and to kind of wrap all of that into like one cohesive thing to understand. If you're using version control though, is it fair to say you're not using a page builder because there's not really a way to do it?
No, I mean, there's definitely situations where you could use both. You just wouldn't be version controlling the stuff that the page builder does, which is like the design of your site, like the visual design of the header, the footer, the layout, all that stuff. Maybe you're not using it for that, but maybe you have a situation where let's say you had like a WooCommerce site and you wrote some code so that when they make a sale, you automatically, create an account, you trigger some emails, you do some extra flows, you send them to your like ConvertKit list, and you did all that stuff with code rather than like trying to find a bunch of off-the-shelf plugins that like didn't quite give you the full control you needed. So you have all this custom code that's like extending WordPress, extending WooCommerce, adding some functionality, adding some admin stuff. So you could definitely version control that because that stuff's like mission critical too. That stuff's needs to work. It needs to be tested. So you can version control little pockets of it and then let the page builder do what it's going to do. Let your plugin updates run like they're going to normally run. Leave everything else alone. It's definitely a possibility.
So if you created like just for lack of a better term, we'll call it like a little code snippet, like something, what, I don't know how much it would be, but like you wanted to, like you said, extend WooCommerce to do something, right? That like you couldn't find in the settings, you couldn't download plugin, whatever, and you decided to do that. If you made the decision though, or if you thought ahead and you were like, well, I'm doing this on this project, but I'm going to do it probably on other projects too. Would it make sense to, I don't know the terminology, would it make sense to make like a custom plugin or something out of that code so you can version control literally just that as like its own custom thing? And then that lives somewhere. You can install it, but it's yours. You can install it on your site and then, or the current site, and then you can install on like 6 other sites. And then if something ever breaks, you can change it in that one spot and then kind of like just update the custom plugin. Is that, am I understanding that, or what's that actually look like?
Yeah, that's actually like what I'm working on this afternoon for like a client project where they use some proprietary integration, and it's the developers basically just like driving them crazy, outrageous costs and everything. So we build a custom replacement for it, and now we need to deploy it to 100 sites, and we need to be sure like, hey, if I need to update it because some API changed, with their API integrations, yeah, how do I push that out to 100 sites or something like that? So yeah, that's exactly like the perfect use case for it, is that like we control the code in one spot, and then if we push an update, we can ping like all those other sites to pull in the latest code, the latest update. I mean, it's basically anytime you're doing this stuff in WordPress, you're just making a plugin. It's always going to be a plugin. I mean, you can do some custom code in your theme, but like most people are kind of against that. Really, it's just like you write a custom plugin for that functionality, and you can also try to make it as like sort of vague as possible so that you could use it on other projects, like that sort of thing. Or like you manage a bunch of sites for your clients, right? You could have a plugin that's like, it's got a contact form if they need your help. It's got like, some stats that you send back to you or something like that. It's got some extra little like snippets or something. Yeah. And then you just push an update to it. It goes to all the sites. It updates them, all of it at once. Yeah. Pretty common use case.
Interesting.
Because yeah, that's that second use case, like moving code from one place to another, moving code from one place to a bunch of places, getting code from a bunch of places and putting them in one place. Like that's like kind of that's the main goal. And so if that's a thing you feel like, man, I really wish I could do that, I could move code and stuff or move features around, that's kind of where you're at.
Interesting. Matt, appreciate you, buddy. Learning in public. There's another good question there from Heffen there. Yeah.
Yeah. At what point when a client comes to you, do you use or consider other web development platforms outside of WordPress, AngularNet, out of curiosity? What about, I'll let you go first. You go outside of WordPress?
Not really, no. I've thought about it for, probably the closest thing that I've thought about is for e-commerce, like maybe going to Shopify, because I've seen many like large shops go to Shopify. But that's a whole nother like type of conversation. I feel like there's always still like like as a quick example, like Taylor Swift, right? Like her website is built in Cadence on WordPress. I don't know who's doing it, how they're doing it, whatever. But then her shop is on Shopify. So slightly different conversation, but as far as like how you're architecting like the whole digital presence of that, like why was that decision made? Was it because they hated WooCommerce? Was it because it's literally just a good idea to have separation of concerns and not have everything on once? But then the other side of it is like, okay, well, Shopify is really good for e-commerce, but I guess it's not even really a CMS. I've used it, a few times. Like it's not really good for that. So it's a really interesting thing that we see play out on big stages. You know what I mean? Like with big names and things. So yeah, I definitely don't know too much about the other platforms though, as far as outside of those ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good example. That also goes into like, there's this other side of WordPress that's the headless WordPress, which is again like this sort of niche area, but it's this area where you say like, I'm going to build a website and it's going to pull the content from WordPress and it's going to pull the products from Shopify and it's going to pull the like, personalization data from HubSpot and it's going to like mix all that stuff together. And so like, yeah, someone's logging into a WordPress site somewhere and adding posts, but that's not what the end user is getting. It's all like fetched and mixed together into this like headless soup. Those are those places where, there's all these kind of crazy complicated ways that are like used by like the tiniest percentage of WordPress sites. And then there's like the other 99% of us who are just building content sites. But yeah, there's definitely places where there's Shopify's even better. We use Laravel is a thing we use a lot. Like once we want to use like things where you're like, I don't want to fight with WordPress. I don't want to like find a plugin. I just want to build something. Laravel is really popular because it's similar to WordPress in that it's PHP. That's kind of where we go. Kevin said, I had some of the same questions Mark is asking. I mean, yeah, we all do. I think everybody, like, we all go through this thing where like, do I need this? What is this? Why are so many people using it?
Yeah. There's a lot of info out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Chris says, only go down the path as far as you need based on the project.
Yeah. Can we explain headless real quick? Like just what that means? Because that's like a buzzword that I don't know.
Yeah. So like they'll call it headless, they'll call it decoupled or something. But like, when I go to your website, it's a WordPress website. Like I'm actually just like WordPress is running in the background and it's going to like generate all the pages and all that stuff. Right. And then like, I'm going to see that WordPress website. But what a headless WordPress, and this is gonna be like a bad simplification. And like, if Aruba's still in the chat, she's going to like yell at me for this. But like, imagine if I built everything inside of WordPress, but then I never went to the front end of that WordPress site. Like I just never looked at it. I didn't worry about it. I just only ever lived in the admin and I only ever lived in the back end. And then WordPress has all these built-in APIs where you can definitely go somewhere else and build with a different tool like React or something like that. And you build like an app and then you just say like, hey, go to WordPress's APIs and give me the content, give me the data. And you're building a completely separate app. And there's just reasons that you might want that, but you should only ever do it if you have good reasons, because it's it takes away a lot of the fun of like, hey, I made a WordPress site and I click preview and I get to see what my post looks like. Like you lose all that, your forms don't work, your plugins don't work, nothing works. You have to build everything from scratch. But there's times where a client wants that because they want to build their website in JavaScript and they just want a nice place for their marketing team to go log in and update content.
I see. So it's like you're using the CMS portion of it, but you're not utilizing any page builder or Gutenberg or anything for the front end. You're kind of just literally using it as a place to store the data and then something else to display it, like Chris is saying here.
Yeah, exactly. Like everybody's seeing a different side of your site. Like nobody's even touching the server. Nobody's visiting the server except for the people who log in and stuff. But yeah, it's usually used when people are trying to mix multiple sources, when they're mixing WordPress with a Shopify, with a different thing. They're trying to bring in all these different things. Or like I do one where our client wanted a mobile app. So they log into WordPress, they update a custom post type, and then in the mobile app hits up the WordPress API and pulls the blocks and shows them in the app. So it's like,
wow,
it's just a way to, because WordPress is so good at managing your content. It's so much better than logging into like any other thing, you know?
It is very good at that. I don't know anybody that says otherwise on that. That's a really interesting thing, because I've had people ask me for apps before. They weren't, I don't know how serious they were, but it's like, hey, can you convert that? We want our website to be an app. Well, it's like, well, go to Safari and say like save as, whatever. But like, I mean, if you actually wanted a proper thing, yeah, I guess that's one really interesting application for Headless then, where you could do it that way.
Yeah. And Rupa says the reasons for Headless are few. In 90 cases, not worth it. That's honestly true. It's definitely like a buzzword, and but it's, there's situations where it's super useful. And then Chris says you can go the other way and use BigCommerce as your backend headlessly and output with WordPress. Yeah. So it's like,
oh wow,
I guess, yeah, another alternative is like you have a WordPress site, but then all your e-commerce stuff actually happens somewhere else and you pull it in. I mean, that's kind of like what people are doing with Stripe nowadays. It's like you just put in a Stripe button and it just sends them to Stripe and it handles all of it for you, and you don't even have to do it on WordPress.
Interesting. Well, I know we got there's a fantastic comments. I know we got a little off track there, but like if with the original stuff there, did you have any other like big pieces? We probably talked about them here and there, but like we talked about collaboration, we talked about like just tracking changes and everything like that. To kind of summarize on the version control piece of it, like are there any other like huge benefits or things like that you'd be like, if I'm experiencing something like this, I should probably consider, looking into it more, possibly moving towards more of a version controlled workflow?
Generally, if you're coming from WordPress, the first, it's definitely different from the page builder perspective. But if you were kind of more traditional WordPress, where you were like using like SFTP and like FileZilla or something, and you're editing the theme files, the minute you're doing that, like you should use version control, because like right there, you're eventually gonna cause yourself a problem. Like that always leads to problems. So if you find yourself changing like actual files in your WordPress by SFTP, or going to WordPress where they have that theme file editor and you see like a little code editor where you can see the code of your theme, and also if you're doing that, that's the time to start saying like, okay, maybe I should like look into this version control thing, or if I don't, I should use a page builder or something like that. That's going to be a safer place to change like the structure of my WordPress site entirely. And if you want to join a team, if you want to work at like maybe join an agency or get hired as a freelancer, like inside of a larger project, or anything where there's other developers, it's probably time to start learning it. Because those are going to be that's like the career move probably for you.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So definitely if you're a team, like Chris said there too, team, and you're actually writing code and everything, that makes total sense. Okay. If you're actually, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So I guess then again, this is slightly outside the scope of, because I would call this like 101 understanding like what it is. But I think that to me, as somebody who's more of like, this is cool, I just kind of want to make sure that I understand these concepts, that I'm not, like doing something wrong per se or whatever, or like, what have you. But I think the question that I would have to have in my mind, as probably many others would be like, okay, if there comes a time where like I need to, if I am building that team, if I am making more custom code, like when is that point? Like when does it make sense to even write? I think that would be the secondary question. We're like, when does it make sense to go more custom? And it sounds like our verdict on that is, again, back to what Matt said about accountability, kind of, and just like reliability on the code, as you said with the example of if your website goes down, like how bad is that going to be for you? All those good things. So this has been enlightening. Yeah, there's not really like a one, like, hey, if this, then that. There's not like if you do this, then you use version control. It's kind of like a medley of different things, which is cool because then it's different for everyone. But
do you ever have like,
you're good.
So you ever have a client ask you for something like that you can't do with a plugin, and then do you go back to them and then you say like, well, here's a plugin that's going to get you like 80% of the way there, and then they're just happy with it? Or is it like they're not even like that particular that's not even a conversation that comes up?
That's a great question. I've had that happen, and what I've done is I've found a plugin that can do it. So, and again, like when I say I found a plugin, I'm not like saying like right off, like right out of the plugin repository or whatever. I mean, here's why I think this conversation gets really interesting is because we're at a point now where, again, I haven't been in it forever. I haven't seen like it fully evolve since like, 2000 or whatever, but we're in a period now where I feel like there's so much good software out there that, again, certainly could break, certainly might have, problems like with this plugin versus this plugin, especially when you have more plugins. It's just, you definitely are asking for a disaster there. But I feel like that's where it breaks down for me slightly, is that there isn't, to this point, and maybe that's why I just don't use version control. One, because I don't have a team. Two, because I haven't like had that breakdown yet. I've had situations where like, oh, they want like a nested query loop. This was like 3 years ago, and I was like, oh, well, what I'm using right now can't really do that, but like I'll go, I found like CrocoBlock Jet Engine. It's like it had like a query builder, and the query builder was way better than what I had like with Elementor at the time, just as an example. So I definitely probably could have custom coded those types of things, but not at my level, not at where I was. But that's a good example. Like, do you have an example like of those types of things? I mean, are these people like just super particular? I mean, I would also say like, isn't it generally like the more particular, the more expensive, the higher budget these people have? So it's like, it's just kind of different,
Yeah. And it's like, do you want that to be your job? Like, do you want your job to be writing code? Do you want your job to be dealing with this stuff? If you don't, it's not like one is a guarantee, like, oh, bigger clients, bigger profit margin. Like, that's definitely not always the case. So like that's one thing to take out of the equation, is even like their budget, if like that's a motivator, but yeah, I mean, like a recent thing is like dealing with a client where it's like, we have a bunch of these things, and we want our website every 12 hours to hit this API where we manage all of our, company inventory, whatever. And we want it to fetch it, put it into the website, dynamically generate this content. And then if I change it here, I need my website to do it. And so maybe they're using this really custom, weird, integration or something. You can find a plugin that kind of works with it, but doesn't do everything you want it to do. They're really particular. The plugin looks like it's maybe hasn't been updated in 4 years, that sort of thing. Yeah. So then, that's the budget where you say like, well, here, we'll just do it ourselves, and we won't have to worry about security and performance because we're going to control all that stuff. We're going to manage it for you. But yeah, it's definitely, integrations are probably the big frontier right now for where the custom code is still being written, because it's still really hard to communicate your website with like some weird management system that's like for your weird industry that like nobody else uses, and like there's no profit for somebody to make that as a paid plugin, because there's just, it's so bespoke.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, this is a good comment here. I had a
pretty big project.
I had a thought about that in the similar vein as the comment here was like, this is probably, again, too simplified of a question. But the way that I would think about it is like, what is the largest this is too simplification, but like, what is the largest website that, like, the largest amount of money, largest amount of websites, hard to define, that you could build with a page builder setup and plugins, like very little custom stuff. Like, let's say reputable plugins though, because there's a difference. There's definitely a difference between like reputable software and like premium stuff and like just off the shelf. But let's say premium plugins, premium page builder stuff like that. Zero custom code. What is like the biggest and like most expensive website you could build in that arena and not lose sleep at night? You know what I mean? Like that would be like a question that I would pose. Again, too simplified. But
Yeah,
but
yeah,
just to
yeah.
give kind of an idea.
I mean, you said it yourself. Taylor Swift's running Cadence. You know what I mean? Like, I would honestly be surprised if they have any version control because what's her site? It's a brochure website, right? It's like
Pretty
you said,
much, yeah.
this the
It's just
e-commerce
links, yeah.
isn't connected. It's just some brochure content that is and that's the site where like honestly, like say you're going to Taylor Swift's website, like you're not going to her servers and like WordPress is going to run all of its code and then you're going to see a website. Like that's cached, that's sitting probably on Cloudflare. Like the
Right.
WordPress server maybe hasn't really done anything in a day. Like it's there and they probably have maybe no custom code, but I would probably assume they at least have a staging environment where they test the plugin updates and make sure everything looks good and then update on live. I would guess they would at least have that level of it and test their updates of their plugins. But there's like it's I mean that site is getting a massive traffic and there's really nothing to break, you know? Because there's probably doesn't even have a contact form. You know what I mean? Like it's not there's literally nothing happening. It's just static brochure site. So you know, you could definitely do a big site and do all this stuff if there's nothing to break.
Yeah, Chris has some good comments on that, again, it all seems like it's functionality based, which makes total sense. It's not size, money necessarily, but I just think that like I feel like even so, I've never worked in version control. Obviously, I've never worked with like full custom code, but like for instance, I built like probably the craziest build out that I ever had was like a membership platform for like people to come on, like specifically wealth advisors to come on, like, and the client wanted to like put a bunch of content on there, ton of videos, ton of blog posts, ton of all that sort of stuff from the content side of it. It was, gated, and it was like you had to have a subscription to see the content. You could, nobody else could log in, that sort of stuff. So already right there, like if you're thinking in terms of, my line of thinking, not like anything custom there, you're already thinking like, okay, well, I need a page builder. So at the time I had Elementor. You need probably a page builder enhancement because at the time Elementor was lacking. So I needed like Crocoblock, Jet Engine plugins, and Jet Engine also handles the custom post types and stuff. So that kind of covered that. So not ACF. Then you need, I need a way to charge people money, right? So I'm going to go WooCommerce at that point. So I went WooCommerce. Well, then, as WooCommerce goes, you need to buy extra add-ons if you want to do anything nice. So I needed WooCommerce subscriptions. Well, I also technically could probably get away with this, but I kind of need WooCommerce memberships too, because memberships is what actually does the content restriction. There's other options, obviously, for all these. But I'm just telling you the stack. It's getting ridiculous, right? And then you needed, and then they also told me that they wanted like social media aspect of it. So we went Buddy Boss, right? So this is getting outrageous. You know what I mean? And I know that this isn't necessarily the right way to do it, but this stuff does exist. So this is like a nuanced thing where it's like that happened to me 2 or 3 years ago, where like I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean? Like I knew enough to get that client. So that type of case study, as somebody, in our industry, I think would be really interesting. It's like, what if that comes to you? How do you handle something like that?
Yeah, membership sites are like love them, hate them relationship with membership sites. I think the clients are always they have really like eyes are bigger than their wallet syndrome when it comes to membership sites. Yeah. They have this sense that like everyone's going to want to log into their membership site every day and like post social media stuff and nobody does. Like there's always like this like thing about membership sites. But yeah, that's exactly the situation that I've been in where it's like, all right, now I got to spend a day looking at Restrict Content Pro versus WooCommerce because there's 3 features in one and 3 features in the other that they want that's not in both, or so then you're doing that. The WooCommerce add-ons are ridiculous and add up and all that stuff. You keep going. And then like, there's that voice in the back of your head that's like, isn't there like Thinkific or what's the other competitor everybody loves, right? Where I'm like, I could just spin this up in 5 seconds on a proprietary system and not use WooCommerce at all and, not be responsible for any issues. So that gets a little crazy. Like, I don't really like doing the membership websites personally because I really don't like dealing with all the plugin stuff like that. I also that's why we've switched to Laravel for a lot of that kind of stuff because Laravel's the opposite where it's like, and with WordPress, you're always kind of fighting plugins and you're like, I'm trying to get you to do this. I'm trying to get you to do this. And Laravel's like blank slate, write 3 commands and like you've scaffolded everything you need. So it's a little like different of approach. And now you just have to be responsible for all the design and stuff. But yeah, membership, like I don't think there's a good answer to it. I think that WordPress started where you could do all of this stuff and it was really cool because you couldn't do it anywhere else. But nowadays you can do it in a lot of other places. So it's a lot harder to make that case. And the price does not compare now that you have to buy $500 or $600 a year of annual license key subscriptions for plugins and all this stuff. Plus, I think it used to be that people would just pay for a pretty looking website. And I think nowadays that's like less of the case because again, that's another thing that's so commoditized. It's so easy to get a pretty looking website that like gets you most of the way there. So there's less of a market for that. Just like, make my website pretty. So I think all those things are sort of changing and we're seeing like, it's a lot easier to sell very cheap websites and a lot easier to sell very expensive websites. And like, it's a lot harder to sell those like middle of the road websites that are like, 10 to 30, 40K range or something like that, which a membership site should hopefully be at least that. But yeah, there's no right answer to the membership site. It's like, do you want plugin soup or do you just want to go custom? And it depends on their budget, Yeah,
definitely didn't charge enough for that membership site that I dealt with because that was a pain in the ass even without custom stuff. So
yeah, you're like, you never make enough money on the membership sites. I hate membership sites. 100%. I don't like doing them.
What would be an example then? What would be an example then of like if I came to you with a scope that like you would like you got like obviously at a larger agency you're going to attract different clients, you're going to have different conversations with clients, but like what's a typical project look like then as far as the functionality and stuff that you're kind of like referencing here that you would that custom code version controlling and all that would really benefit you to utilize in those instances? Is it just like a lot of integration stuff and like random things, or like are you actually rebuilding a lot of things that plugins could do but you just don't want to use them?
Yeah, I mean integrations is definitely the main thing because that's always going to be like super bespoke and you're not going to want to tie a bunch of stuff together for that. That's where the main stuff is. I mean, I'm not saying like we still do a lot of like simple brochure sites that are very fast to spin up, especially faster with like the block editor, Tailwind, that sort of stuff we use. So like that's still a common thing. And we just like to version control that stuff anyway, because like it's just easier for us to say we build a design and the client gives us feedback on it. It's just easier for us to do that, to manage it. Like it's just a workflow thing at that point in time. But like the high dollar stuff is definitely the integrations, and it's definitely that more like application, like where it's like somebody logs in, somebody does something. Because like once you let users log into your WordPress site, that's a completely different level of WordPress site that should be charged completely differently. The minute somebody can make a sale on your site, log into an e-commerce thing, any of that stuff, because now you're actually running the WordPress site. Like performance actually really matters now. Like all those sorts of things really add up. And so that's just like a different tier that like the minute that is allowed, the price goes up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. There's definitely a lot more complexity there. Interesting. Was there anything else? I think we went down another rabbit hole, which is all good stuff. Was there anything else, do you think, as far as the version controlling thing? I mean, again, I think it's, you have to understand what it is, but I really think at the end of the day, it comes back to just asking and trying to figure out if that's something that you're trying to do. And like you just said there, even though you use it for brochure sites, it's kind of, you're using it, but you don't necessarily have to, more or less. It's because you're already using it in the company workflow for certain projects. So why not just use it for everything? That makes total sense.
And it's great. Like we did one where like they wanted, it was a membership site. They want to have like an Azure like single sign-on for a certain client. We're going to write that in code because like there is an Azure plugin, but it's very not good. So we're going to write a custom, let people log in with their Azure account or something like that. Well, one developer, he did most of the design. I came in and did that part of it. It just is so much easier when I can say like, hey, I did my part on this thing. I submitted it right here. You can look at my code and you can click a button and you can add it in and put it on the client site when you're ready, because you're the stakeholder dealing with the client and I just came in to like help out on a certain part of that project. And so a site where like, yeah, it didn't need version control, but then in that moment where it did, because we wanted a second developer to work on something, this is like, Now we're not sitting there going like, well, here's my code, and then I actually overwrote your code, and then I made a staging site, but you made a staging site, and now there's two different staging sites. It's like you don't have to worry about any of that, because the workflow is already there.
Definitely noted. If I ever become a developer and write code, I'm gonna definitely use that just in case I need to ever collaborate. That does make total sense. Obviously, it's not the only thing, but it makes total sense.
Yeah, there's like 8 comments here about people using Tailwind with WordPress. Very popular approach. Tailwind is, and then saying don't use Tailwind. I don't personally use Tailwind on WordPress, but my coworkers do, and they love it. Tailwind's kind of, it's like an automatic CSS or something. It's like styling library. And then in an agency scenario, is it feasible to use a single theme for the majority of all clients' sites? I mean, generally in our case, we just take the theme and we change it. That's kind of the easier approach, but kind of go either way.
Just like a custom theme that like kind of has bare bones of what you want, or is it like a specific?
Yeah, like my coworkers, they like this one called Tailpress, where it's basically like a theme and it just has Tailwind, and it's like they'll use that with like ACF blocks and kind of just like style the whole thing that way. And they can, they're just like a lightning quick with that approach. I use a more vanilla kind of starter theme, and then it's nice because like especially with the block editor, like there's other things we didn't get into, but like with the block editor, it does really good like write a piece of CSS just for one block, and if the block's not on the page, the CSS doesn't load. Everything gets more like streamlined, narrowed down. There's all these sort of like other things that kind of go into it once you have that build process in place.
Okay.
But these are like performance gains, like the margins, so it just depends.
Yeah, well, I definitely know a lot more about version control now than I did when we started, and a lot of good reasons too. So, I appreciate this. I think I think that was a super great 101 on the version control thing, and I'll have to remember this as I continue to scale up, build a team out or anything, and I'll definitely be able to tell other people now, a little bit more about what, like why or why not you would want to use it, because that there's definitely a time and a place for sure.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about WordPress. It's like a big, huge ecosystem, all different ways to do it, all different types of sites. It's kind of what makes it fun and makes it hard.
Yeah.
But thanks for the idea, man. Thanks for coming on. We should do this again. I think
brother.
I think there's definitely I have a lot of questions for you about like how you're doing your thing, how you're doing like the grid pane, managing all your sites and stuff like that, running your own thing. So I think we got to get back together and talk about some of that.
Always happy to chat, brother. I appreciate you having me on. We'll definitely do it again.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, in the comments. Awesome stuff, too.
Yeah. Do you have like, you want to give like one last, like where to check out?
Yeah, for sure.
Stuff?
Yeah, I'm on YouTube and everything. If you just type in mjs.bio, it's kind of like all my links and everywhere you can find me. So you can just go there, poke around, see what you like.
Awesome, man.
Sweet. All right.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks everybody for the comments. This was fun.
Sweet.